The United States is stealing money, and you won't believe how they're doing it. This country has printed a whopping 4.6 to 8.7 billion paper money in 2023, but their inflation rate is sitting pretty at 3.7%. Doesn't it seem quite confusing? Since when we look at other countries like Japan, it has printed 3.03 billion paper money only, but their inflation rate is already experiencing a high of 3.2%. That means Japan is draining approximately 15.15 million in lost purchasing power compared to the USA. The disparity is nothing short of fascinating. Even if you compare those stats with other countries, you will notice the same difference. It seems the money philosophies of the US and other countries are totally opposite. When the US prints more money, its inflation keeps a nice balance, but when other countries do so, their economies go all mad with hyperinflation. This all isn't something new. It's a well-played game by the US to pass on their inflation to other countries while printing more dollars. But how did it all begin? Let's take a quick trip down memory lane. In 2022, the COVID-19 pandemic took a huge toll on the world's economy. People were dying in minutes, hospitals were running short of medical supplies, there were lockdowns everywhere, and the global monetary system experienced a huge clash in history. No funds were available to cure the public. The world was drowning in desperation only for quick help, care, and whatnot to save lives. Thus, the United States thought, why not make the most of this situation? They came up with a strategy portraying as if they were too sincere with the nation. But it wasn't something to introduce more ambulances or special vaccines, but a $3 trillion huge money supply. Yes, the United States printed those trillions of dollars, and that too in just 3.5 months. It may seem they're just throwing money around, but the reality is a bit more interesting than that. The U.S. Federal Reserve went on a mission disguised as a curse to boost the economy, but it was just a mere evil strategy. Though here's the twist, despite the insane amount of dollars they printed, the U.S. only saw a mere 8.2% increase in inflation, while the rest of the world was going mad with hyperinflation. Such as in the United Kingdom, prices of products rose by a huge 9.6%. Meanwhile, in France, their GDP fell by 13.8%, resulting in crazy inflation, which was too much for the daily waged public. This was unbelievable and downright cruel, and the main culprit was none other than the United States. Because those whopping $3 trillion wasn't something innocent for the sake of stabilization, but it was an evil strategy to let their dollars float around, causing the price level to get out of control. During those times, the United States basically rolled out a strategy called quantitative easing to prevent their economy from sinking. But what was that exactly? This whole quantitative easing isn't new. It was first introduced back in March 2009, right after the stock market crash of 2008. It's an old trick, but it works. The main goal of quantitative easing is to encourage borrowing. With lots of loans available from banks, interest rates usually stay low, making it super affordable to borrow money. For example, take a look at what happened in March 2020. The Federal Reserve's Fed funds rate, which is the UK's base rate, dropped from 1% to a mere 0.25%. It's synonymous with getting a discount on your borrowing costs. Now let's look at the power of a tiny 0.25% interest rate during the pandemic. It made borrowing as affordable as it could possibly get, and the idea was that people would take this opportunity to spend their money on goods and services, giving the economy a much-needed boost. This is an example of how QE can benefit the country in the short term. It emotionally helps people to keep spending their money, especially during the crisis. However, fast forward to 2023, and the downsides of this strategy are now pretty much evident. Those trillions of money printing have got people scratching their heads over the crazy prices of products. Inflation is hiked up like anything while the salaries are the same. But how the money printing in the United States result in inflation in other countries, that's the real evil you may have never thought about. You see how the US just printed out trillions through quantitative easing. Thus, as the US money supply expands, the value of the US dollar relative to other currencies decreases. This is because there is more US currency in circulation. Imagine this scenario. Instead of a 1-to-1 ratio, the exchange rate between the US dollar and the euro changes from $1 to 0.9 euros. So European consumers started buying American products because they're now more affordable. This sparks a demand for US goods, and European buyers need US dollars to buy them. They exchange their euros for US dollars to make these purchases. The increased demand for US dollars strengthens the dollar relative to the euro. Hence, the cost of European imports from the United States rises. European businesses importing American products now pay more in their currency for the same product. They may pass these increased costs on to consumers, which is basically causing crazy inflation in Europe, and so does in other countries. That's the whole game this evil strategy plays. It first traps you and then makes you pay double. However, you may wonder why the US can print money while other countries can't. Well, the answer is they can't. But first, let's see. If the governments print too much money, it can set off a chain reaction. People end up with more money, leading to increased demand. The problem is the supply can't keep up with this sudden surge in demand that directly increases the prices like crazy, which can lead to hyperinflation. A prime example is the crisis in Zimbabwe in 2008, when inflation soared to a staggering 231% in a single year. A sweet that previously cost only one Zimbabwean dollar cost 231 million Zimbabwean dollars a year later. But such extreme cases didn't happen to the United States and other first world countries yet. So again, what keeps the US printing more money yet the economy continues to stay afloat? The reason is the US's strong influence on the global economy and the fact that the US dollar is a key global currency. Even in 2023, about 80% of global trade happens in US dollars. So the demand for the dollar is pretty huge, and it can handle a short-term excess supply. Most international deals are done in dollars, and central banks worldwide stash it in their reserves. This flexibility allows them to manage extra money. But why is this the case? Well, it goes back to post-World War II times when the US was rising as an economic powerhouse while the world was struggling with the war's aftermath. Thanks to its economic and global importance, the US played a major role in creating organizations like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and GATT, which later became the World Trade Organization. With the United States being a powerhouse in global trade, it was on its way to surpass the British pound as the global currency. Institutions like the World Bank and the IMF fueled this transition by providing loans in US dollars to developing countries. The US also rolled up its sleeves through initiatives like the Marshall Plan to help rebuild Germany and Japan, two powerhouse economies that are still tight buddies with the US. This made the world economy rely heavily on the US dollar, giving the US and its Federal Reserve a bit of room to play with their currency. On the flip side, most developing countries, with some exceptions like China, Russia, and India, lack global recognition for their currencies. Even these exceptions hold a small part of the global reserve, limiting their ability to print money or borrow freely. Thus, as long as the US dollar continues to rock the stage for global trade and debt and help countries grow, the US Federal Reserve can manage the money supply during crises within certain boundaries. However, you may also think, will the US keep printing money forever? No, it can't. No matter how much economic power it holds, printing money nonstop could spell disaster for the economy. What's even more intriguing is that some developing countries like China, Russia, and India are already looking for alternatives to the US dollar after their experiences during the Russian-Ukraine war. Even the central bank has gone into a gold buying boom. Between July and September 2022, they purchased around 399.3 tons of gold, marking a jaw-dropping increase of over 400% compared to the previous year. Thus, if more economies want to diversify their portfolio with currencies like the euro, ruble, pound, and whatever, the Federal Reserve will have to find itself treading a bit more carefully with its monetary policies or evil money printing strategies, to be specific. So that's a wrap. Yes, the USA prints evil money, but it isn't getting slow anytime soon, but it will not last forever. The de-dollarization trend is already there. Hence, let's see how long the mighty dollars can stand against the trend. Hit that subscribe button and let us know your take on the US money printing system.